Hey there, you girls, boys, and non-binaries. This is your boy Ron Dawson coming at you with another episode of Dungeons and Do-Rags. And you're probably wondering, where are my co-hosts, JD, Javon, and Adu? Well, this is Sunday. This is the day we normally film. We're supposed to record on Fridays, but somehow that got railroaded. Black people being black people. It always gets pushed out. So we've been recording on Sundays, but I don't know, something about football happens on Sunday. I don't know. It's football and fantasy football. They do their fantasy football thing. Who cares? Anyway, so today just getting me, but today I want to talk about something that is passionate of mine. And it's this particular creator, Amir. And I made a video about him with a couple last week, or uploaded one last week, where he was defending Charlie Kirk. And we're coming back to this topic because, and I think the reason why this is something that moves me so is because not that I was ever, I think, as sunken as Amir seems to be. There was a time where I was more like center right, and like maybe there's a part of me that kind of like feels for people like Amir, who are these more right wing thinking black people who I don't know. And it's not that you can't be conservative. I don't have an issue with, in general, black people who are conservative. I have an issue with people who could be classified as modern day agents. And I don't use that term widely. Like wildly? I don't use that. I don't use that term lightly. I classify that as someone who, in their pursuit of acknowledgement and appreciation from, uh, let's say, the majority demographic, they do things to actively support either white supremacy ideology or straight up racist. And they usually do it in exchange for large YouTube followings, large TikTok followings. And so I think there's a difference between being someone who's black, who has maybe some conservative views on economics, whatever, but you still genuinely care for like the black community. You're doing things that uplift the black community. In fact, I'm gonna show a brother in here a little bit later today who I think kind of fits, who would probably fit in that category, versus someone who's either completely blind or ignorant to what's actually happening, or you know what's kind of happening, and you act like it's something else. And in exchange for the kind of appreciation and lauding that you get from the scores of people from a majority demographic. And the reason why I use that term is because the same could be if you're someone in the LGBTQ community and you are a Trump supporting Charlie Kirk fan, despite all the things that they do to actively harm the LGBTQ community. So you can go on and on. So, what is a common refrain you hear from black conservatives? Their critique of more progressive blacks, especially in conversations about affirmative action or DEI. Stop being a victim. I'm not a victim. In fact, in I recently watched the Amanda Seals Surrounded episode, and she was talking to black conservatives. Surrounded is this YouTube series by Jubilee where they get one person with one ideology and they surround them with 20 people, 25 people with like an opposing view. So I recently saw the one with Amanda Seals and black conservatives, and common talking point is, I'm not a victim. I can do anything that white people can do. And we need to stop playing the victim card. We need to stop making excuses. And it is something that you just hear nonstop. And so it came up in this video that Amir made where he was praising Charlie Kirk and talking about the supposed lies about Charlie Kirk. And this particular topic came up, and we're going to break it down. And I'm going to show you real easy Can't talk. I'm going to show you very easily how ridiculous this particular argument is, especially coming from people like Charlie Kirk or anyone who's a right-wing white Christian nationalist. So in this clip we're about to watch, Amir is looking at one of Charlie Kirk's debates on campus, and he's talking to this black gentleman about affirmative action. And so throughout Amir's whole video, he's addressing all these issues that Charlie Kirk supposedly has been used to say he's a racist, homophobic, etc. And in this particular section, this is the affirmative action section. So we're going to look at what Kirk is going to say. And this is the kind of thing that Kirk does. We're going to show you in a minute. And how Amir just laps it up.
That person is not qualified when literally, and you have to be qualified in order to even to get in that position.
Well, so let's take college admissions. So this is a great example. At Harvard, we learned because of new revealed documents that black students were having test scores that were 30 to 35% lower than their white counterparts.
Okay.
And so therefore, if you saw a black kid at Harvard, it's a fact that they were not having the same test standards as their white counterparts.
Still doesn't matter.
All right, let's stop right there. So let's address this particular fact that Kirk just throws out there. That's what he does. He throws out facts. He knows that the people he's talking to aren't going to have anything on hand to challenge him. There's no one there to fact check him. Go watch his debate against Cambridge students when he tries this shit and see what the Cambridge students, that particularly this one woman named Tilly Middleton or Middlehurst, I think is her name. She demolishes Charlie when he starts throwing out all this BS. So just look up the debate. Charlie Kirk, Cambridge. They mop the floor with him when he tries this shit. So he throws out these facts. 35. It's a fact that black students at Harvard had, on average, or something 35% lower test grades. So let's look at where he's possibly getting that information from. So we're in AI overview, and basically it's AI that Google uses where it pulls information from the internet and brings it in all in one little place. Was there a study that showed black students had grades up to 35% lower than whites? Multiple studies have shown a significant academic achievement between blacks and white students in the U.S. But the figure of 35% appears to be a misunderstanding or misrepresentation, I think it's the latter, of specific findings. The figure is likely derived from complex statistical comparisons of graduation rates or other academic outcomes, not from a simple finding of grades being lower, 35% lower. 2013 study published by the National Institutes of Health and data from the National Longitudinal Survey of Freshmen to analyze grades and graduation rates at 28 selective U.S. colleges. It found statistically significant GPA differentials between race gender groups. The study showed black males had the lowest GPA in the group, followed by black females and Hispanic males. It noted the factors like academic preparation, e.g. high school GPA, scholarly effort, and campus involvement. Graduation rate comparisons. The same NIH study found that black males were 35% less likely to graduate on time than other race and gender groups. This is likely the source of the 35% lower figure, which refers to a specific graduation statistic, not overall grades. Charlie never says stuff like this. So other factors contributing to this achievement gap. Unequal school quality and funding. We know how systemic racism has impacted the quality of schooling that children, white or black, but predominantly black in poorer neighborhoods get than white students. Socioeconomic background and family income levels. Racial bias and discrimination within the education system, including implicit biases in grading and disproportionate disciplinary action. So we have all these statistics that show that this 35% figure, one, is being misapplied, that there are, I mean, you could make the case, okay, black students are on average have lower GPAs than their white counterparts. But to suggest that Harvard is just letting in people who have horrible grades and that people that you see at Harvard have 35% less, have a 35% lower GPA on average, that black students have a 35% lower GPA on average than their white counterparts, again, we see here is BS. And this is what Charlie does. He throws out these statistics. Some other interesting statistics in this AI overview research that I was doing. So for years, Harvard's admissions process admitted a small percentage of students with lower grades over applicants with perfect A averages due to the holistic review system. While academic excellence is the most important component, other factors such as athletic achievement, legacy status, or personal qualities allow certain applicants to gain admission even if their academic metrics were slightly less competitive. So they were looking at a more holistic view. Athletic recruitment was one of the things. But here's another thing that's interesting: legacy status. Applicants with a parent who attended Harvard College received a significant preference. Between 2014 and 2019, Harvard accepted legacy students at a rate more than 5 times higher than its overall acceptance. You want to take a guess at the color of the majority of legacy students of Harvard? Take a wild guess at what it is. I think you can figure it out. Some legacy students were accepted through the Z list, which meant that they were admitted but required to take a year off before attending. So this is what I call reverse DEI, if you want. Like, for literally hundreds of years, and I think I talked about this a little bit in my last video, you've had the equivalent of DEI through things like legacy status towards white students, because for hundreds of years they had a socioeconomic benefit into getting into Harvard in the first place. So ever since Harvard's inception, you've had white students being able to get in, and then the legacy process starts where they admit their grandchild, and then that person, when they go to college and they have grandchildren, they help get their children and grandchildren in ad infinitum. And so part of affirmative action is counteracting things like legacy status. And so, again, painting the picture that the Black students admitted to Harvard on average have 35% lower is BS. But again, Charlie doesn't address any of these other issues with regards to who got into Harvard and how.
Affirmative action in a nutshell. Oh, well, Charlie Kirk was against affirmative action. That means he's racist. But there's tons of Black people against affirmative action as well. I don't need you to lower my test.
Again, it's like rewriting history. No one is saying that he was racist just because he was against affirmative action. It's because of the racist ish that he said that people were calling him racist. Anyway.
Why would you want to get a handout? Why would you want to just be...
So he's showing a clip from, I don't know, looks like something he probably got from AA Overview about Black applicants effectively had access to Harvard with lower academic scores than other racial groups, including Asian applicants. This is the students for fair admissions versus Harvard case showed all this. And again, this was the holistic overview. In fact, let's go look at what they were saying about that particular case. All right, here's information from that case that he was referencing. Arguments regarding differential standards before the 2023 ban. The debate over whether Harvard lowered its standards was central to the Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard lawsuit. Data from the lawsuit shows significant racial gaps. For similarly qualified applicants, Black and Hispanic students had a much higher likelihood of admission than white students, who in turn were more likely to be accepted than Asian American students. An economist for SFFA testified that if an Asian American applicant had a 25% chance of admission, a Black applicant with the same credentials would have a 95% chance. So basically they're saying here that all things being equal, more weight seemed to be given to the Black students. Harvard's argument: the university defended its process in a holistic review that considers many factors beyond test scores and grades. We kind of talked about it earlier, including life experiences, character, and potential contributions to the campus community. These non-academic factors can weigh more heavily for certain candidates. For example, some data indicated that Black and Hispanic applicants received higher personal ratings on average, which Harvard officials testified was not the result of discriminatory basis. Basically, they're saying Harvard had these other admission factors that they were looking at beyond just academics. That's the holistic overview as to who they were admitting. And by redistributing how they weighted what got you into Harvard, it was allowing these Black students to be entered at a higher rate, all other things being equal with regards to the grades. So this was not a case of Harvard letting in Black students who had subpar grades. Okay, let's get back to Amir and his man crush over Charlie Kirk.
It's the data. So, for example, it's literally at Harvard. You had kids with perfect SAT scores, perfect ACT scores that were white.
So that makes the degree from Harvard worthless then.
Well, you're exactly right. Yeah, actually, Harvard's degree is becoming more worthless because it's more race-based than merit-based. You're exactly right.
Affirmative action in a nutshell. Oh, well, Charlie Kirk was against affirmative action. That means he's racist. But there's tons of Black people against affirmative action as well. I don't need you to lower my test scores because that's even more racist. I don't need you to lower my test scores to give me a chance to get into college. Don't you want to feel like you earned your spot? Don't you want to feel like you worked hard for something? Why would you want to get a handout? Why would you want to just be given, hey, you black, we're going to enter you into Harvard because you got a D. Even though these white people are getting A's, I know you're not capable of getting an A, and we need more blacks at our college. So we're just going to go ahead and accept you in even though you have D's.
This is where you just want to say, Ninja, please. Again, is he just being ignorant? Like, it only takes a little bit of common sense to realize that that is not what's happening. Harvard is not letting in people with D averages or with D's and C's over people with A's just because poor black people can't get in. If I'm a B or if I'm like a C or D student and I get into Harvard, yes, I may wonder, am I getting in here just because of the color of my skin? But if I'm a straight A student and I am captain of the football team and I'm student body president or class president and I get into Harvard, I'm not wondering whether or not I got in on the color of my skin. No black student who knows that they're the ish and knows how well they have achieved are worrying about whether or not they got in just because of the color of their skin. Now, there was one study I was reading that showed that in a recent admission, about 25% of the Harvard admissions had a 4.0, and the other 75% ranged somewhere between like 3.75 and 3.9 or something like that. And, if you have a black student who has a 3.75 and he gets in over an A student has a 4.0, as we read earlier, there's a more holistic overview as to why Harvard may be doing that. But Harvard is not letting in people with D's. I mean, it's just like ridiculous.
The thing, you're making the assumption, no, it's actually real stuff that has been going on. Real stuff, you guys. That is okay to call out. It is. So before people go shout from the rooftops, oh my gosh, it's horrible, it's racist. It's not.
You're right. It's not necessarily racist. It's just stupid. You're just being stupid. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. Or again, you're just lying.
Actually racist in reverse. I think some of the affirmative action things being put in place is actually racist. Critical race theory.
Okay, y'all can laugh.
All right, this is where we can get into the thing that actually got me the most heated. This idea that I was bringing up at the top of the video of conservative blacks. This is something that a lot of conservative blacks use, and it's like a talking point of those on the right who speak out against affirmative action or DEI or any of the things that black people quote unquote complain about all the time. We're about to get into like what prompted all this. And so you're about to hear this sister who goes to this school, I guess this is Alabama somewhere, and she is about to share her experience, and then we're going to see, well, we'll see what happens. I rewound us back to the start of the black woman student sharing her thoughts. And we're going to break it down. First of all, let's start with the fact that here's a black woman. She's sharing her experience. And it looked like it was edited, so I don't know how much they allowed her to talk. So I'll give them that. But I just found it interesting, the dynamics here. So here, the sister's talking.
Really don't understand.
CJ, come here. Really quick. I have a question. Come here.
Come here, CJ. Come here, CJ. Come here, let us. Is it just me, or do you get like calling your dog type of feels from this clip? He's literally calling over his. I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna. Like, again, is it just me? Let's call over little CJ to speak against the black woman to prove how she's wrong. Let's call over a little token. I'll try not to say anything worse than that.
So CJ, just really quick, you're a black person. Are you hunted at the university?
I don't feel hunted at this university, but I guess the difference between me and some people here is that I don't choose to be a victim, Charlie.
All right. I don't choose to be a victim, Charlie. So this is the rhetoric that you hear all the time from black conservatives and from other white conservatives about black people who complain too much. We're always complaining. We're always playing the victim. And here's what I find interesting. That we're called victims, or we're acting like victims because we're stating like actual discrepancies that are rooted in white supremacy ideology and systemic racism and the impact that they're having on the black community. We bring those out and we're playing the victim. Yet, for the past 10 years, what have you been hearing out of right wing media. I mean, let's play a few clips of some of the things Charlie and other right wing people have talked about over the past few years, and you tell me, does this sound familiar? Who really is playing the victim card here? Here's Charlie on the damage clip that the damage report used, talking about transgenderism.
And this is to go a level deeper, but you guys are smart, you'll get it. The transgender movement actually matters even more than biomedical fascism, and they actually are together because the transgender movement is an introductory phase to get you to strip yourself of your humanity to mesh with machines.
So that's Charlie talking about complaining about the transgender movement and the impact that it's having. Who else is complaining about the transgender movement? Let's play this clip.
Biological men do not belong in women's toilets, and Charlie Kirk explains just that. Hey guys, this is Isabella Moody from Resist the Mainstream. Make sure you give today's video a like, leave a comment down below, subscribe to our channel, and we will get straight into the video.
I'm a senior in high school, and right now my Board of Education is seriously considering the movement to allow trans people or whatever gender they identify with to use as gender-specific bathroom in my school. So I'm just trying to figure out what point do we need to have it stop, or what points can you give me to go to the Board of Education and actually like rebound against what they're trying to say.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's God bless you. Look, I want to be very clear because I don't want to come across as cruel, but
Of course,
we do not reorganize society based on people's mental conditions, nor should we. Okay, we should give people care, and care is not affirmation. Care is someone who's willing to tell the truth and challenge them back into what we know to be a flourishing, productive, and happy life. So if there is somebody that is a boy that thinks that he is a girl, and they want to say they want to have locker room access or whatever, well, then I would point to Loudoun County, Virginia, where a boy who thought he was a girl went into the locker room, and twice a young lady, twice. That's one example of several that happen across the country.
So they take these extremely rare cases where cisgender boys dress up and go into locker rooms to harass girls. That is not the same thing. That is not a trans girl or trans woman wanting to have the respect and dignity that anyone deserve to be able to use a locker room that signs with how they show up and identify in life. And the things he was saying earlier about trying to convince people who help people who are detached from reality, again, just completely ignores gender dysphoria, which is a real thing that people deal with, that people have. And so this isn't an issue of really wanting to protect women.
But here's the one thing, and just to respond to the previous question in a separate way, he says, well, what difference does it make for you? And this is this is the traps conservatives fall in all the time, which is as if this entire movement stops just at acceptance. That's nonsense. So first they ask you to tolerate it, then they ask you to accept it, then they ask you to participate, and then they ask you to celebrate it. No, celebrate, then participation. I'll give you an example. In Oregon, no, it was Vermont, I'm sorry. In Vermont, there was a women's sports team, I think it was volleyball or basketball, where a man who thought he was a woman got locker room access. He started to harass the young ladies on the sports team. And by doing so, the young ladies then started to complain, saying, I'm uncomfortable with this man. Can you do something about it? The administration said the young ladies were being transphobic, even though he was dressing nakedly in a locker room next to other young ladies. They are now in probation and investigation for being transphobic.
I didn't bother to do the research on this. I would bet you $1 million. So I did research, and whatever he's talking about is not going to be exactly how he's putting out. Again, I don't know the details of it, but he has proven that he throws out stats that he either knows are incorrect or misleading, or he himself doesn't know. And this whole idea that trans women are coming, that they want to harass, and they just want to, like a trans woman wants to get into the locker room so that they can ogle over other women because there really are boys who want to look at girls. Again, it's patently ridiculous. Charlie has been one of the huge proponents of speaking out against trans women in sports. This is another thing that a lot of those on the right complain about. Trans women are coming for our sports. Again, I think you see the narrative I'm painting here in terms of like who always complains about being a victim. For shits and giggles, let's look at some of the stats on the number of trans women. This is from sf.gov. Trans people are estimated to make up 1 to 2% of the population of the United States. However, trans people make up less than 0.002%. That's 10 out of 500,000 of U.S. college athletes, and even fewer of recent Olympians. 0.001% identify as trans. There's literally like a dozen or even that many trans people in professional sports. Yet you would act as if, or you would think that there's this huge movement of trans women who are completely taking over every major sport. The Trump administration spent like over $120 million on anti-trans ad. I think this article talks about the number of 745 anti-trans bills introduced in the United States legislature across the country in 2025 alone. All because of this fear of trans women taking over everything. So again, I just ask myself, here you have people like Charlie Kirk complaining about trans women taking over sports, taking over the bathrooms. You have Charlie Kirk complaining about people like Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama, and other black women who don't have the brain processing power to do the jobs that they took from white men. Charlie Kirk has talked about brown people, or how do you word it? Oh, the illegals coming here to replace us. I mean, replacement theory. In fact, I think I have a clip of him talking about replacement.
Illusion is saying they are releasing entire family units into the United States. Now, some people are saying I'm being too harsh on Texas. Well, Texas, whether they like it or not, are front and center, smack dab in the middle of the great question of our time, which is, who runs the country? What do you do when you start to have a apathetic tyrant, now apathetic when it comes to immigration law, but very engaged when it comes towards forcing vaccinations? What do you do?
The tyrant he's talking about is Joe Biden, by the way.
I know so many amazing patriots in the great state of Texas, and I love Texas, that have been waiting and are willing for this moment. Deputize a citizen force, put them on the border, give them handcuffs, get it done. Sure, that's dramatic. You know what's dramatic? The invasion of the country. We're going to talk more about that. We're going to talk about how the other side has openly admitted that this is about bringing in voters that they want and they like, and honestly, diminishing and decreasing white demographics in America.
Again, who is sounding like the victim here? So you have this narrative from people like Charlie Kirk complaining about the trans people coming in and taking the sports, complaining about black people taking white people's jobs, complaining about brown people coming in and replacing them. You have right, sort of like leaning conservative YouTube channels like Neurotic. His entire channel is essentially complaining about woke Hollywood and all the diversity that's being forced down your throats. You have the Christian evangelical right complaining about having to see a half-second kiss of two lesbian women. I mean, the amount of complaining that comes from the right with regards to things being quote unquote forced down their throat, which really is code for being forced, which you're not forced. You don't have to watch the movie. You don't. If there's a movie with two people kissing, you don't have to watch it. But having to be subjected to seeing those lesbians and those gays kissing one another, and having to be subjected to seeing men dressing like women, and they just don't like being exposed to anything that looks different or outside of their bubble as to what they think is quote unquote normal. Which is why it's like comically ironic to hear people like CJ say things like this.
Quick, I have a question. Come here. Go right there.
Come here, little CJ. Come here.
So CJ, just really quick. You're a black person. Are you hunted at the university?
You know, I don't feel hunted at this university, but I guess the difference between me and some people here is that I don't choose to be a victim, Charlie. Which I think is the biggest problem we have here today are people who wake up every single day looking for a reason to be oppressed, looking for a reason to cry and make an excuse about why they're not in a position to go win. I don't see the.
And again, it's the cognitive dissonance is like astounding. They don't see it. The fact that they're complaining about black people who have real experiences based in systemic oppression, systemic racism. And, maybe there is a nuanced conversation to be had about whether or not some people take it too far. But en masse, the kind of things that sister was talking about with regards to what her experience is like, and then people like CJ here saying, well, his experience is very different. I did some research on this dude. This is a dude who is very right wing. He is running in Georgia. He was working after Joe Biden won. He was working to basically prove that he basically bought into the 2020, the lie that the 2020 election was stolen. So he's one of these dudes who's like trying to get the 2020 election overturned. I bet you $1 million this brother is not a Kappa or any other black related fraternity. I bet you $1 gajillion that if you looked at the people he hangs around with at his school versus who that sister, you would see a considerable difference. I'm just guessing. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, mea culpa, I admit I'm wrong. Maybe there's a large number of black conservatives at Alabama that I don't know about. I just think that his experience being the kind of person he is, saying the kind of things he says is going to be different than the sister. I think it makes sense. But then he goes on to talk about another thing he obviously doesn't know anything about, critical race theory.
And so, CJ, let me ask you, CRT, racist?
It's not just racist. It's the exact iteration of white supremacy, just in reverse. I think it's important that we start teaching young people not to hate other people because of the color of their skin. We can teach black people to be proud of who they are without telling white people they should be ashamed of who they are. You know?
Amen.
Admittedly, I'm not an expert on CRT, but I know enough to know that CRT is not about telling black people to hate white people. I know enough about critical race theory that a huge part of it is just looking at and examining the impact that systemic racism has had on this country and looking at how it impacts our laws, how it impacts socioeconomic situations of black people in this country, and the kind of things that we can do differently once we recognize the source of some of the things that we're dealing with in the country. That's what CRT is about. And with regards to, his indication or his narrative that it's about telling white people to hate their history, whatever. No, it's about being aware of the impact that white people have had on the black community in this culture, in this country, and understanding the impact that it's had. It's not saying you as a white person should hate yourself or you should hate your history. It's about knowing what it is versus like what this administration has been trying to do, which is erase it.
So, closing thoughts, CJ. Is this trying to divide the country?
It's not only trying to divide the country, it's trying to break apart the foundation upon which it was built. You know, people forget the words of MLK, Rosa Parks, all those people who fought so hard for us to be a united country. We didn't see the color of one's skin, but their character. This is about taking us away from the vision and the dream of Martin Luther King and just taking us to the dream of Kamala Harris. And I don't want to live that dream.
Amen.
Sorry.
CJ, you're a great American. Give it up for CJ, everybody. So good.
That is my friend CJ Pearson. Shout out to CJ. Incredible video.
Of course, he's your friend. I find it again comically ironic that you have Mr. CJ invoking the name of Martin Luther King and having Charlie Kirk saying men when Charlie Kirk is on record and even doubling down on the fact that he thought Martin Luther King was a bad dude. You know how he feels about Martin Luther King? I'm pretty sure he doesn't feel too great about any of those other civil rights leaders that CJ, that they just love to throw. They always like to throw MLK when it suits them. The cognitive dissonance, I think, is just comical. And so you have, it's so frustrating to see these young black men who have a head on their shoulders and the popularity and the prestige that they get by propping up these lies, by essentially being with this one brother I'm about to show you calls an overseer. Let's just jump to it. And this will be the close out the video. So this is a dude I came across. This video is good. So I came across this brother Marquette Devon, and his channel is about like helping you build health and wealth and whatnot. And admittedly, I haven't done a lot of research. I don't know everything he believes or gets into, so I can't 100% co-sign everything he does or says. But this one particular clip, and there's another clip, kind of, I feel like it gives me enough. I feel like he's the kind of, at one point he says, you know, he's not crazy about liberals. He thinks they're kind of crazy. He doesn't believe in hate crimes. He thinks there's enough law on the book where all crime, regardless of what you were thinking committed, should be considered a crime. But again, from this clip I'm about to show, I think there's enough where I see where this brother is coming from. And in this clip, he's talking to this young gentleman is a Nigerian who lives in the UK. And this and another clip, and maybe I'll show part of the other clip too. They're talking about Charlie Kirk. So I guess this young black guy is a fan of Charlie Kirk. And Marquette is trying to tell him how he is. Actually, I think I need to cut to the clip. I need to show you this other clip first because he's talking about this dude being an overseer, and he kind of tells him what an overseer is. So let me bring that up because I think that's important to see. Okay, to set the context, he's talking to this young man about reason why his mindset about Charlie Kirk is so dangerous. And it started with him asking, basically he's saying that, long story short, that this dude is too nice. He has a sweetheart, whatever. He's too trusting of basically the white supremacists who are using him to be a token to speak to other black people in a way that keeps them depressed. And so this young man is from Nigeria, from the tribe of Yoruba, I believe is. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it. But we listen to a little bit about what he's saying, and it'll paint the picture for you.
Debate works. Monsters with no morality. Debate works. Let's explain to Netanyahu why they should not take the land of the Palestinians.
So in this case, he was asking, what do you think the solution is to people like Charlie Kirk? Because this dude is really nice. And what Marquette is basically insinuating that when you're too nice, you get walked and you get stepped over. And this young man is saying that you can have debate. And Marquette is saying, when you're dealing with evil men in power who have no morals, debate is for shit.
Let's debate Netanyahu on why it's not good to kill children. Because debate is, you just explain, and then the monster's like, oh, like, for sure. I now have changed my mind. I agree with you, little black guy from UK, but really from what, Nigeria? You're folks from Nigeria? Where are they from? Ghana?
She's living in the UK.
Is it Ghana? Where is it? Nigeria. I'm good. Damn, I'm good. I'm really good. Marquette is the greatest. So yes, little black guy who's from UK, but you're really, to me, Charlie Kirk, you're really just Nigerian. So little Nigerian guy, yeah, you've persuaded me because I look at you as a human. Yeah, I look at you as equal to me, the white guy who's constantly explaining how you're inferior. And because I view you as an equal to me, the one that I call low IQ, I'm going to let you, the low IQ one, explain things to me and persuade me in a debate to treat you like a human, even though I fundamentally don't think that you're a worthwhile human. That makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. Do you not ever sound insane to yourself, or is that just to me you sound insane? Do you ever listen like, damn, I don't sound realistic?
I'm being honest. I genuinely don't think what I'm saying is bad. I think it's
yes. Well, let me tell you this. Let me tell you this. People like you, with love, like, because I don't think you're an evil person. I just think that stupidity is evil. And as much as that is the case, you are just as dangerous as Charlie Kirk, who is just as dangerous as Adolf Hitler. To be the one who is the enslaver, clearly dangerous. To be the one who is the overseer for the enslaver, oh, insidious, nasty work. It's nasty work because some people might look at you, Adi, or whatever. I don't know. You're Nigerian. You're not white. You don't have a white name. I can't say your name because it's not white. It's like Nigerian. So since we're not Nigerian, I'll just pretend as I can't pronounce it since I'm a white. So people like you, you're nasty work because some blacks might look at you and think you're one of them, but really you're one of me. You're my spawn. You're my creation, and I appreciate you. Are you a Christian?
Yeah.
Exactly. Does your mom have a white Jesus in her house? Picture. Be honest. Somewhere you've seen a white Jesus in your mom's house. Be honest.
No, but we do go to church. I mean.
Okay, the white Jesus is in your church. Okay, very nice. But you don't think your mom has a white Jesus anywhere in the house?
No,
damn it. We didn't get you as good as we could. But you go to church Sundays and you worship a white Jesus, right?
I mean, Christianity was there before.
No, I'm just asking. In your church, is there white Jesus?
No, there's not a picture of white Jesus.
I mean, you said you don't
this
have
is
to lie now. You just said white Jesus.
No, there's no white Jesus. But I know the point you're making.
I thought we had you all the way. Because our effort is to rob you of what you are. We don't want you to follow the ism. Be yourself. Be good to yourself. Be good to good people. Be yourself. We don't want you to know who you are. We want you to be just like us. If you have a unique name, like a Nigerian name, we want you to have a name like John, Paul, James, a white biblical name, an English name, an anglicized name. And if your name is not one of those things, then we will pretend as though we cannot pronounce it. So what is your name?
Spot on. I don't know if Charlie Kirk did this on purpose, but he was always mispronouncing Kamala's name. In fact, a lot of people on the right were doing that, but Charlie was definitely doing that.
What's your name?
My name's Adi, but
no, your name is Toby. What is your name?
Okay, I see what.
No, your name is Toby. What is your name?
I'm telling you, I don't.
It's Toby. Just Toby. Get the whip. This is going to act up. Listen.
Do you think that you are acting like that when you would criticize
Toby? One second. Just real quick. Okay, you live in the UK, bruv. You're a Christian, just like the whites in the UK, bruv. You dress like them. What was your religion? Like, what's your tribe? Was it Igbo? Yoruba. Nice, Yoruba. What was their religion before Christianity or Islam?
I think it was some form of polytheistic. Or
you think? You got to look into it. Oh, so what you're saying is, Marquette, you're right. They've separated me from what I am. You maybe don't have to follow it, but damn, you don't even know. You don't even know the history of your people. And I'll tell you why it's so sad, Toby. Toby, it's very, very sad because the Black Americans, they were ripped away from their history and they were forced not to know their history, was robbed of them, knowledge of self. You voluntarily decided to not know who you are, Toby. And the reason you don't know your own religion is because you've taken out the time to learn my religion. I'm Charlie Kirk, the white Christian, and you've taken out time to study my religion, but you didn't study your own. That's fascinating, Toby. Do you speak Yoruba?
No.
Toby. So you're telling me in 2025, where you could very much so have like a second language, speak Yoruba and English, you're like, my history, it's irrelevant. I don't need that. I don't need to know my own religion. I don't need to know the history of the land from which I come. I don't need to speak the language of my forefathers. I'd rather just pretend they don't exist. Toby, Toby, you are me. Say it with me. I am white.
I mean, I understand what you're saying.
No. Just say I am white. Okay, just real quick. Okay, try this. This might feel better. Say I am a white supremacist.
No,
you are. Toby, say it. I am a white supremacist.
How is criticizing? I mean,
oh gosh, you believe that? I'm just trying to get you, Toby. I'm just trying to get you to the truth.
I mean, I'm being
our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the truth, the light, and the something else.
People too. It doesn't make you oversee or white.
What was that?
I mean, you criticize black people too. Like
I do criticize black people, Toby. But you know what I don't do? Do you know what I don't do, Toby?
What?
I don't come on as a mouthpiece for white supremacists who hate black people. That's number one, Toby. And then number two, Toby, I do not criticize black people without also lifting them up. So I might chastise with one hand and lift up with the other hand. And both are needed. But what I don't do the work of the devil, Toby. I do God's work, but I don't do the work of the devils. I don't criticize black people and speak the talking points of white supremacists. And what I also don't do is I don't shed my own culture in favor of the culture of another people. There's nothing wrong with Christianity if you're a white Christian. There's nothing.
That right there is one of the things that makes me so passionate about this particular topic. People like Amir, where I think there are a lot of valid criticisms about some of the things that happen in the black community. But one, black people are not a monolith. And two, there's a difference between recognizing those things that could be better and also actively working to uplift the community to make it better versus being a mouthpiece for a white supremacist ideology that Charlie Kirk so often espoused. And I kind of feel sorry for Adi here, who he keeps calling Toby, because he seems like a sweet kid. He really does. He seems like a sweet kid who has gone down some Charlie Kirk rabbit hole, and he thinks what Charlie Kirk says makes sense. And this brother Marquette is just like dropping some serious knowledge bombs on him that he's not understanding about what it means to be an overseer and a mouthpiece. And this piece about this will be the last piece about the lesson he gives him.
Didn't do your research
on black on black crime, because that's another one of these statistics that they like to throw out, the amount of black and black crime. And young Adi here was bringing it up, and Marquette was like, not on my watch.
Because you didn't want to do the research. Why didn't you want to do the research? Because you need that narrative of black people being impulse uncontrolled animals. That's why you didn't do the research, young man, because you're in an era where it's easier than ever to do research. Now, let me finish breaking you down like Legos. Dig this. In addition, you want to talk all of this stuff about, violence, the blacks are violence. This is your Charlie Kirk talking point, young man. How many people have whites murdered?
In all of history?
However you want to take it. All of history, since America started, last week, let's rewind a little bit. I'm going to make it easier. These are setups. I've already thought 10 moves ahead. I'm just setting you up real quick. So walk with me, young man. What's the definition of murder?
Unjustified killing of another human being.
Unjustified.
This is deep.
Who decides if it's justified?
It depends on the person. I mean, you can look at it from a legal standpoint, or more depends. But
okay, so let's take a legal standpoint. Legal, meaning laws. Laws come from what? Governments, correct?
Yep, correct.
Great. Now, if you were under the government, which was in fact a government, would you agree?
Yes.
Then the of all of the people who will remain nameless, the small hats, murdered 6 million of them.
So if you didn't catch that, he bleeped it out because it's the schmatzy government. Rhymes with schmatzy. That's what he's talking about.
That was according to the law, which was justified by the government, meaning it was okay. So it wasn't then by your definition. Do you realize that? Do you realize just by your definition, meaning unjustified according to the law, if the Nazis are the government and they say that it's okay to kill these people, then it's justified. And this is not new in European history, right? Colonialism that's all colonialism, which means that your crime statistics never account for the murder of the ruling class. It's not when they do it. It's when you do it, Toby. But when they do it, it's justified, just like you said. You're a good lapdog for them. Do you understand the logic that I just broke down for you, or is it confusing? I can run it back if you need me to.
I mean, I understand, but you didn't let me say my main point.
No. I'm just saying. So you do understand. You understand how the crime statistics get cooked. For example, Donald Trump murdered some people on a boat recently, right? Supposedly coming out of Venezuela, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Was that murder or was that justified?
Legally, it would be justified considering it was a government.
I'm asking you. Was it justified or was it murder?
I mean, personally, I would say I wouldn't say that's justifiable to do that to people, but by a standpoint, that would have been.
Yeah, it's really tough, you see, because the ruling class, your white supremacists, when they do it, it is justified. And when they do it, it's not accounted in the crime statistics because they decide who the criminal is. And it's you, it's not them. You see, I bet you there's no crime statistics on with regards to the Native Americans. We don't know how many they killed. Kind of hard to count, probably. How many Africans did they kill? Just transporting Africans to the New World. We don't know, but even if we did know, it's not considered murder because you guys are not humans. You're property, you're chattel. How many people were killed once blacks were recognized as humans? Do we have the data on it? Interesting. So what I'm pointing out to you, young man, is that you would follow Charlie Kirk, who's trying to suggest that there's something wicked in the black DNA that makes them so violent, and that's why they have these terrible, unfavorable statistics that show that they're killers. Yet you would observe whites like Ukrainians. Would you say Ukrainians are white? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Would you say that Russians are white? Yes or no?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, great. Thanks for using reality. I appreciate it. Now they're killing each other, right? They're calling it war, but one of those sides is not justified. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so one of those sides is committing murder, right?
Yeah, according to my.
Great. Now, do you think that they're counting that as murder and crime statistics anywhere on Earth?
It depends. I mean, Russia.
No, dummy, they're not counting it as. I can't even ask you guys questions when you people come on here. Of course, they're not counting it as murder. They're calling it war, and they're calling it justified. Just like the Europeans who call themselves Israelis are killing the kids in Gaza. Are they calling that murder? No, they're calling it war. That's what they do. They lie. Their chief tool is deception. And in their lies, you can never account for what they're actually doing. And that's how Charlie Kirk fools people like you. The American government goes into, which is to say white supremacists, goes into Iraq, mass murder. They go into Afghanistan, mass murder. They go into Syria, mass murder. They go into Libya, mass murder. They caused the Ukraine-Russia war, mass murder. They support what's going on in Palestine, mass murder. Now, point is, none of it do they count in crime statistics as murder. None of it. But they have a bloodthirst, these people. There's something in their DNA that causes them to kill because they've never stopped killing, my dear boy. They've been on a killing spree. My whole life, your whole life, your grandmother's whole life. But that's not in the crime statistics.
That's a sermon right there. That is a sermon right there. And that is the nuanced difference that no one ever thinks about. No one ever talks about. When you have people like Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro and spouting all these things about black and black crime, or Charlie Kirk always says black people commit most of the crimes. They commit most of the unaliving. You know, he talks about prowlers, creating this narrative that we as a people are animals. And then but we have someone like Marquette who breaks it down. Who has done the most unaliving throughout history in the world? But it's never counted. Even today, looking at what is happening in the world, who is doing the most unaliving is never counted. It's never, no one says that, you know, people this color have in their DNA evil and that they're animals. For the record, I'm not saying they are because they're not. But the point is, it's so easy to paint the narrative that black people are animals when you look at a very narrow, unnuanced statistic about black on black crime, or the number of black people who are convicted many times unjustly for crimes. Compare that to, you know, the over indexing of, you know, white people who may commit the same number of crimes but are convicted less, and then compare that to the greater number of unalivings that are happening in the world at the hands of other white people. None of that is counted. And so Charlie Kirk throws out these statistics that we showed earlier are misleading or just flat out lies. He throws out these statistics about the number of black people who kill black people when, as McCarthy was telling this dude, the number of people who unalive people of the same color is on par. Like the number of white people who kill white people is very similar percentage-wise to the number of black people who kill black people. You never hear about white on white crime. And it's the narrative that's sold. And you have people like this, like Amir, that started this whole thing, who is like an overseer at the next level. You know, he's getting close to 1 million followers on YouTube. He's blowing up. He's going on tour. He's going to Trump rallies. He is a hero because he, like CJ, come here, little CJ, come here. I need you to speak against this black woman. Come here, come here. We have this black woman talking nonsense. Where's my CJ? Come here, CJ. Now, you're black, right? Tell it. Let's school this black woman about what it really means to be black. That is what's happening. And so I just feel like it's so annoying. It's so frustrating. So this is what they do. This is how they take over the minds. This is the frustration that I have with a lot of black conservatives. Again, I don't have an issue if you are a black conservative, if you're conservative or black. I have an issue if you're a mouthpiece for white supremacy ideology. I have an issue if you're listening to if you're listening to people like Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro or Michael Knowles or Nerdrotic, if you're into comic books and stuff like that, who has like 1.2 million followers, and all of his videos are just complaining about woke Hollywood. I have an issue if you're in the black community or any traditionally marginalized group, and you are just the equivalent of an overseer for the group of people who want to see you put down, who don't want you to advance. And it is the height of irony for a man like Charlie Kirk, cisgender, heterosexual, white Christian nationalist, worth millions of dollars, to be complaining about being replaced. There is no bigger victims in this country in terms of people complaining about how they are victimized than people like Charlie Kirk. the people who have the least amount to actually complain about, cisgender heterosexual white Christian men, especially if you're a millionaire, complaining about being replaced. So when they complain about the trans community, when they complain about black people or brown people taking over jobs that they aren't otherwise qualified to do, when they complain about any of the number of things, having to see two women kissing, having to see all this trans stuff, all this gay pride stuff, when they complain about all that. Another video, Charlie Clerk is saying how he doesn't want his children to go to school where you have a call to prayer 5 times a day. Nothing sounds more like playing the victim than listening to people on the right complain about all the ways in which their lives are being destroyed by trans, black, or insert your favorite marginalized group. And then you have like this people like CJ and Amir, who again are the overseers. And I don't know what the solution is. I kind of think these videos I make is just really cathartic, but I want to be able to, expose some of these things. And, for the 5 dozen of you out there who subscribe to this channel, hopefully this was something new that you found helpful. Next week, the fellas will be back on after, we'll try to just record on a day where some football related thing isn't going on so that we can get the show done. But hey, do all the YouTube stuff, share this clip, go follow Marquette. I'll probably put a link in the notes. I'm pointing him out. And he's a funny brother. He's pretty cool. Again, these are only 2 videos of his that I've seen. So, but these 2 kind of paint a picture where you can see already. You can see I subscribe, or maybe I haven't yet. Oh, as of this video, I haven't subscribed, but I will after I end this. So if you've watched this far, I appreciate you. Like, subscribe, share, and see you on the flip side. Peace.